Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Beit Midrash. Hope everybody had a good week. Hope everybody's doing well, feeling good. And it's Thursday, so getting ready for Shabbat. It's, it's just but what, 29 hours away? But who's counting. Um, so
Whoever is cooking is counting.
fair point. So well, welcome back. Still in Rabbi Jonathan Sacks's Judaism's Life-Changing Ideas, going through Parsha by Parsha, and on Parsha Ki Tisa, which is our Parsha this week. So um, as usual, we'll start it off with you guys. Any thoughts, comments, reactions, questions you wanted to start off with? What did y'all think?
Angie.
I did not like his thought of the week at all.
So it's funny.
Why, Margaret?
Well, what he says is that you're to train yourself not to feel anger. Well, I remember, training myself to wait till I calm down before I hit my little, my littlest one on the tuchus, because that's the only thing that would calm her down. But I only did it once or twice. But anyhow, but in general, I think, I think anger is the motivation for significant social change, and teaching yourself not to feel anger blunts that, although, his caution to act with, I forget his words, but anyhow, with act calmly and coolly, I would, and thoughtfully, I would entirely agree with.
I know I'm getting to know you guys well as we learn together. Because as I'm reading these, I can tell I'm like, this person's really not going to like it, or the entire class is really not going to like this one. And I'm preparing myself as I'm reading. I'm like, oh, this one might be okay. Sometimes you guys surprise me. There's some I'm like, oh, I think they'll be fine with this, and you guys didn't like it. But some of them I'm reading and I'm like, oh, they're not going to like this one at all. And this was one of those, and I'm like, we're going to have some issues with this one. And I actually think I read it. I'm like, Margaret's going to have some issues with this one.
You get 2 points for that.
Suzanne.
Okay. Well, you would have lost. It's like, well, anyway, when I first read it, I thought this is ridiculous. But then when I thought about it some more, but the point he made about when you're angry, you're not in control. That was very important to me, and it made it make more sense. And it certainly makes sense that if you use your anger strategically, it's much more effective. Because I know Howard almost never gets angry. And if the few times he got angry, I mean, around the children, they, it was really something. Whereas if I yelled at them, it didn't mean anything. So anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Because that's just my temperament. I mean, I'm kind of, I should probably get angry more often, I guess, but that's not my nature. And at the office, I know it was the same way. That I had a very temperamental, one of my partners had a Mediterranean personality, and he lost his cool all the time. And it was effective, but if I got upset, it really, they listened. I mean, people paid attention because it didn't happen very often. So, I mean, I think there's some give and take with it. I mean, I think there's something to be said for. I mean, I don't try to stay under control or something or not show my emotions. It's just kind of who I am.
I didn't like the way he worded his life-changing idea because he said we should never feel anger. Why didn't he say we should always control our anger? We should learn how to conquer our anger. So as far as I'm concerned, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He blew 5 words. The rest of it might be okay. I mean, the
So-
concept behind it is
But you
that we're
just said much better what I was trying to say at the beginning.
So,
Let's write our own book.
I think we are.
As the author says.
so I'll play devil's advocate for a moment. You know, once upon a time, and I feel like I can no longer say just like, oh, the rabbinical school. I feel like it's like I'm like, oh, like once upon a time, way back when I was in rabbinical school. Yeah, I did a CPE, clinical pastoral education program at a UCLA Santa Monica hospital where I worked as a chaplain for 3 months. But part of that was part of what underlies that is kind of a training in, you know, both in there's a reading component, there's a practical component, but there's also kind of a discussion component of, you know, reflecting on at least how I, in my program, it was both going into the rooms with patients, but then coming out and reflecting on the conversation and saying what worked well, what didn't work well, but also a key part of it was what were you thinking, what were you feeling as you were having that conversation. And I remember my supervisor for that, Reverend Tim Thorntonson, had interested in your insights into this, but says that anger is not really an emotion. Anger is a secondary emotion that usually is used to cover up something else you are feeling. So, thinking of it that, is there a way we can not feel anger because we recognize that the anger is actually just something covering up something else, and we have to get down to what that something else is, whether it's shame or pain or fear that's what we're reacting to, and we have to deal with that without the anger rather than trying to cover it up with the anger. Throwing that out as a possibility.
That's like you went to psychology school. That's one of the things that we were, you know, worked on during.
I did have a major in psychology. So.
During my internship and further training. Yeah.
You know, I once read a whole book on anger, and I would have read some in it, more in it, except I was expecting to not be here today, and so I forgot about it and had to read the portion very quickly. But Rabbi, I agree with what you're saying. I think many times anger is a secondary response, although it feels like the primary response. And the gist of the book, it was a look at what happens neurologically, and it was a scientific look at outcomes. And all I can remember is that it was negative, and it changed my perception about anger completely after I read it, and I made efforts to not give in to just the emotion, because the emotion of anger itself is like a drug. And some people are addicted to it. It causes certain neurological responses, and certain people are addicted to to it, and you can watch them find a way to be angry about a situation, if that makes sense.
I'm always hesitant to delve into this territory in front of Dr. Lindner, but there is some evidence of, the more you practice a particular emotion, the more likely you are to experience that emotion. So, if you're like Howard and you don't get angry all the time, then your brain doesn't naturally go to that angry, isn't wired for that anger to go through. If you're like his partner who did get angry more often, then your brain more quickly is wired to go into that angry state. So, and you can train yourself out of that. You can rewire and retrain your brain out of doing it. It's just not easy. It takes time and effort, but you can.
I would agree with that. Just yesterday, I had an experience that was kind of strange. I was teaching. I teach creative writing to a group of critically at risk youth. So these are, and there was a young man. He's of high school age. He's probably 17, 18, and he's really a big guy. And in retrospect, I think this young man is probably a behavior problem in public school, or I don't know what his issues were, but he kept talking while I was trying to talk. And I finally just told him to move. And, I hadn't been a police officer in many, many years. And I have, the class has gotten out of my control many times, but I just didn't even think about it. I said, move, go, you move over there. And he gave me a look, and I saw him look over his shoulder to see if there's a man that's in there precisely for that kind of problem, but he was on the phone and not tied up, and I could see him going, do I do what she says or not? And I just said, go. And he did. And then I went, oh God, I've skated that situation. But I knew there was a flash of anger, but I was looking at my anger from a different place. There was another part of me that was observing that I was angry and going, oh, you're acting like you're really angry. I was acting more angry than I was, which is exactly what I think his point is here. And it worked. And I think it's exactly like Howard says, people listen to you when you don't get angry very much. However, I remember my first day in that class years ago, and I'd tried everything. And nothing worked. Getting angry didn't work. But by that time, I had the respect of everybody else in the class, and that made a difference. So I don't know. I think I'm just rattling on. But I thought he was right. I think anger can be a strategy, or controlled anger can be a strategy.
So I want to circle back for one moment, and then we'll come back to that also. For those who did not really like his approach of you should not feel anger, and you shouldn't get angry, and you should only pretend to be angry. Does maybe this thought of Reverend Thorntonson's that anger is not really the primary emotion, does that affect how you view this chapter or how you understand this chapter?
Repeat your question again.
It was a long question. Now I gotta go say it again. Some of you, there was some initial feedback that you didn't really like this idea or the wording of we should never actually feel anger, and you should teach yourself to not experience anger. And there was some pushback initially about his phrasing and what his teaching. However, if you accepted my teacher's theory that anger is not a primary emotion, it's a secondary emotion covering something else up, that's actually what we need to deal with, does that affect your understanding or how you think of what Rabbi Sacks is teaching about not feeling anger?
Well, I think there are, there are a lot of ways to control anger. And one of the ways to control anger is to figure out where it's coming from and why you have that feeling. I'm not sure that that only applies to anger, by the way, but we'll stick with that. So in the sense that so I again, I think the idea of controlling anger in a whole bunch of different kind of ways, but I don't know that that how would you not feel anger? What would that look like to not ever feel anger?
Well, there's a difference between feeling it and expressing it.
Oh, sure, but he's absolutely, but he's talking about, but he's talking about feeling it, and that's quite a different, as you say, quite a different thing. What you're going to do with your anger. But I don't know how you would go about not ever getting angry.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my reaction to Rabbi Sacks's authors. This is a lovely, beautiful ideal he's putting out there that you should never get angry. But I don't know how you in reality do that. Even if you say, oh, I'm starting to get angry, I'm going to take a moment and reflect on what that anger is actually doing. I'm not sure that's actually going to, okay, I'm experiencing shame, I'm experiencing pain, I'm experiencing humiliation. Great. Are you actually going to do that every time you start to feel angry? Like realistically.
I think it happens too fast to do that.
It does.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
it's just there.
I think if you are really good at mindfulness, you can probably control it and identify it as it's coming and be able to step back from it. But not all of us are that good at mindfulness, and that takes a long time to train also.
Well, it basically, I think it comes from the back of the brain, and or down deep inside. TK has probably read this stuff a lot more recently than I have in the book that she's been reading.
Hippocampus.
In the hippocampus, yeah. It comes from right. It comes from the hippocampus. It comes
Hippocampus,
and it comes quickly. The back of the brain and the frontal lobes, which is where all this rationalization and figuring out what is, the frontal lobes work more slowly, and I think neurologically you're stuck with experiencing emotions and then reflecting on them. I think it's just a matter of how fast, what in the brain.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, Barbara.
I'd like to go away from the neurology and ask about the examples. He's talking about examples of anger. One is breaking the tablets. And the other comes later on, where he talks about striking the rock and in an attempt to get one. Because in practice, he struck the rock once before and got water. But the second time when he strikes the rock, the big story is, well, you shouldn't do it this time because I didn't tell you to strike the rock. I told you to ask the rock nicely for water. As a geologist, I must say that striking works a lot better than asking when you're trying to get water out of the rock. But Moses wasn't a geologist. He didn't know. Now, I think the examples of anger that he gives, I'd like to know, does Sacks think that Moses wasn't really angry? He was showing the anger to get a reaction or get the desired reaction from the people in the first case, particularly where he's breaking the tablets. Did he do it for its shock value rather than because he was so angry?
So, yeah, look, I do think Sachs believes that, yes, that Moses's anger in the first case in our parsha today is motivated by a desire to change behavior and the shock value and the people haven't really seen Moses get upset yet before. So this really being the first time, it's kind of like, oh, we must have really crossed the line, and now we have to, follow and listen and pay attention. The second example, I think, I have a lot of feelings about that second example, which I'm not going to get into at the moment unless I change my mind or you twist my arm otherwise. But I think the way he's reading it is Moses was angry at the people and took it out on them.
And took it out on the rock.
Yes. And so, I think reading Sax's commentary, I wasn't necessarily persuaded by you shouldn't feel anger at all. But I do think we can distinguish between constructive and destructive anger. And I forgot who said it. I don't know if it was Howard or Suzanne or if it was somebody else who said anger does have its benefits. And not just in the sense of getting people's attention, but odd social change usually comes from a place of anger. The civil rights movement came from, while King preached peace, peaceful demonstration, it came from a place of anger and hurt at the way they were being treated. That's okay if you're able to control the anger and use it for productive purposes to change the source of the anger. Destructive anger is, lashing out uncontrollably on things that don't necessarily deserve it. And so, this is where you might see abuse happen. This is where you might see some cases, this is where you see some of the racism and the anti-Semitism and some of the hatred coming from is a destructive kind of anger, that I'm angry at the way my life is and where I am, and I want to take it out on other people because they're the reason that my life isn't the way I want it to be. So can we distinguish between the two, or, harness our anger for good rather than for ill?
Rabbi, I'm trying to put this into terms that fit my life experience. And it starts with a very angry father. He was angry about all of the things that we still have problems with. He was a man who wanted to progress and to live in a better world because we had the power to do that, and we weren't doing it. But I saw him angry many times at home, but not at us. He was very definitely opposed to what he saw going on around him in his beloved home state. I'm not sure I still feel the same way about it, but to counter the kind of anger I know he was capable of, there was the posthumous and even while living accounts by people writing for the newspaper or some kind of an association giving him an honor, that he was a gentleman. He was never ugly to anybody he met. And he didn't stay on the sidewalk. If somebody had trouble walking and his skin was the wrong color, we got off the sidewalk too. I mean, we were raised as children to know there were things that were good to do. And anger, I think, in public situations was not. I may be just only partial, I only have a partial view, but it did strike me when I started trying to collect his letters and papers and things, that how basically one page he was angry and the next page he's sympathetic and gentle and understanding and accepting all people, even the ones who were making him angry. And I wish I had read the article, the chapter before coming to join you, but I'm glad I came. Thank you.
I'm glad you came too. Look, I do think it sounds like there's a constructive way that he was using his anger and, you know, trying to make the world a better place through it. But you kind of said the key part there that, you know, he didn't take it out on you or on other people that didn't deserve it. I think that's a little bit, so I think that's the part that I think Rabbi Sacks, and where I think a lot of the Jewish tradition wrestles with this, is that he could have done that. He could have seen all the suffering and taken it out on his children. He could have experienced it himself and taken his anger at the world out on other people. And he didn't. But we know that people do that regularly, and that anger can cause us to lose control. And that's what I think the rabbis wrestle with, is, and why, you know, Maimonides is saying don't get angry at all, because you'll lose your power of control when you do that. So the tradition wrestles with this a lot, and there's a lot there, you know, he only really cites Maimonides, I believe, right? But there's lots of teachings in the Jewish tradition about the dangers of anger and not getting angry, and how anger is a bad thing, and how you should not get angry, and how you should control yourself. And I think a lot of it stems from this concept of not being able to control it once you experience it. And maybe even some of it is that, you know, whether or not they actually knew it, they understood that angry people are going to get angry more frequently. I guess my question and my challenge to that is, if anger is kind of a natural reaction to things, are there ways we can harness it for good rather than just blowing it off as we shouldn't experience it at all?
That would be the concept of righteous anger.
Yeah, I think there's a Jewish book. I can't remember who wrote it. It's called Righteous Indignation, but I can't remember. I want to say it was Harold Schulweis, but I can't remember. There's a Jewish book out there that called Righteous Indignation. You know, you should be seeing the world, you should be seeing it as a horrible place, and do something about it.
So in one sense, it's motivating. It's a feeling that might motivate us to do something about something that is wrong.
But then it's a controlled emotion. It's not.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It's not controlling you.
In the case of these two, though, it says, okay, you can feel anger, but don't show it. And sometimes, well, then he goes on to say, when, well, if this is on the bottom part of page 109, look angry even if you aren't, for the shock effect. Because when someone in authority displays anger, the person or group it's directed against is in danger. That doesn't compare to these two situations. In the first case, I say he broke the tablets because he was angry that people weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They went for an idol. They didn't, they didn't have God primary in their mind, etc. It's exactly the same thing with the rock, striking the rock to get water. And he's describing the two different situations, top of page 110, second paragraph. People are dancing around an idol. You can be angry. But it's the same situation. He says you can't be angry. There's no water and the people are crying out in thirst. It's the wrong reaction. On one hand, the story is that Moses is upset, or they're saying that as the reason here. Moses is upset because the people are crying because there's no water. It's the same thing. They're not believing that God is going to provide the water, and he has a reaction. He doesn't believe that God is going to provide the water. And
So
I don't agree with the show your anger angry, show you are angry, don't show you're angry. Where were the people in danger the first place? Where were they people in danger the second place? It's not always, anger is not always because of people in danger. Oh.
So there's a little bit of maybe an ellipsis here in that I don't think Rabbi Sacks tells the full second story. I think the way Rabbi Sacks is reading it, in the first story, in Ki Tisa with the golden calf, there is a shock value in Moses standing up there, holding the tablets that God hewed, what's the past tense?
Cut.
Yeah.
Hewn,
Carved.
carved, thank you, carved, perfect. That God carved with God's own finger and wrote them with God's own hand, and Moses takes them and smashes them in anger. That you have to like picture yourself as one of the Israelites seeing them being like, what did we just do? Right? Like there is a shock value there in the way the people cross the line and Moses has to get their attention to let them know that they crossed the line. I don't think it's necessarily that, the way Rabbi Sacks writes it is that anger, like when somebody is directing their anger at you, you feel like you're in danger. And so you kind of focus differently. Isn't that what he says?
That is what he says, but I don't think that clarifies. I don't think that directly requires the use of the people are in danger.
No, I think, but Moses is giving them the impression they are in danger with his anger to get their
Danger
attention.
from who? From him?
But idolatry is the worst sin you can commit at that, especially at that time. So
Correct.
it's more
So,
than being thirsty.
there is a danger involved in the golden calf too, in that what's God's immediate response to the golden calf?
Get rid of them all.
Kill the people.
Let me wipe everyone out and start over with you, Moses. There is some danger involved in this. Now the second example, I think if I hear what you're saying, Barbara, it's like they're actually in danger in that they don't have any water to drink. Here's the difference is that immediately preceding God telling Moses to talk to the rock and Moses hitting it instead, Moses' reaction, the people say, Moses, there's no water, we're thirsty. And what's Moses' reaction? You rebels, you unappreciative, you're unappreciative, you're rebellious. How long are you going to continue telling us that God's not going to take care of you? How long are you going to keep doing this? This is ridiculous. He yells at them. And then God says, speak to the rock and give it water. And Moses says, fine, bam. So the way that reads is more that Moses is taking his anger at the people out on the rock. His anger is not at God for not providing them water. It's not that the people don't have water. He's not angry at the situation. He's angry at the people for complaining. And I think that's where the destructive part of the anger comes in, is that he's taking his anger out elsewhere rather than trying to find a solution to the problem that they're experiencing.
And he's also disobedient.
He is disobedient.
And is his defense, it worked the last time. He got water by hitting the rock.
So this is one of my rabbit hole drashot on this that you'll probably hear at some point. Who are these people at that time in the book of Numbers?
Slaves.
Huh?
Slaves.
Not necessarily anymore. At this point, they've been out of slavery for a while. It's probably a lot of their children. And God gives, yes, God told him in Exodus